Frank Fritz wasn't just a collector, he was a man on a quiet, relentless mission to preserve what the world had already decided to forget. Asterisk asterisk, with an eye that could spot value in what others tossed aside and a charm that masked a world of private battles. His story wasn't just television worthy, it was tragic, raw, and human. Asterisk, you knew him as the bearded guy with the mischievous grin from American Pickers, but behind the road trips, rusty treasures, and high fives was a man quietly unraveling. A life filled with chronic illness, heartbreak, addiction, and finally silence. Asterisk asterisk, and now, long after the show moved on without him, after he'd been replaced, left behind, and nearly forgotten, Mike Wolfe, the man who knew him best, finally broke the silence. What he said wasn't a tribute, it was a confession. And it's darker than anyone expected. Asterisk, but to understand why it ended this way, we have to go back to before the cameras, before the fame, before the fall. Asterisk, Frank was born on October 11th, 1963, in Davenport, Iowa, a small-town boy surrounded by Midwest simplicity, but even as a kid, he wasn't like the others. While most kids chased touchdowns or arcade scores, Frank was chasing stories hidden inside bottle caps, pocket knives, coins, and old signs. Asterisk asterisk, his idea of excitement. Stepping into dusty antique shops where time stood still and everything from the smell of varnish to the tick of old clocks whispered history. Asterisk, where others saw junk, Frank saw evidence. Who wore this uniform? Who drank from this cracked mug? Who left behind this forgotten toy? He wasn't just collecting things. He was building a map to the past piece by broken piece. Asterisk, by high school, Frank's obsession had matured. He started picking up bigger pieces, motorcycles, rare memorabilia, vintage advertising, while others partied on weekends he was at estate sales and flea markets, brushing off rust with reverence. Asterisk, but then he disappeared into normalcy. After graduating, Frank didn't chase the dream. He became a fire inspector, spending 25 years in a job as far from antiques as you can get. Or so it seemed. Asterisk, but think about it, inspecting old warehouses, walking through forgotten buildings, hidden corners of history. And slowly he began collecting again, this time firehouse antiques, helmets, alarms, extinguishers. He wasn't just inspecting fires, he was fueling his own. The collector in him never died, he just hid. Asterisk, eventually, Frank took the leap. He left behind the safety of a paycheck and opened his own shop. Frank's finds, a cozy treasure trove of firefighter collectibles and rare Americana. Quiet, unassuming, and pure Frank. Asterisk, and that's when Mike Wolfe re-entered the picture. Asterisk, now here's the twist. Most people assume Frank and Mike were lifelong best friends, but that's not true. They grew up in the same town, Bondurant, Iowa, but they weren't childhood buddies. Asterisk asterisk, their bond didn't form until adulthood, when they discovered their shared obsession for what others threw away. Mike was the visionary, the dreamer, the kind of guy who turned junk into ambition. Frank, he just loved the hunt. Asterisk, Mike started filming his picking adventures long before anyone cared. He knocked on network doors, pitching a show where to pickers traveled America digging for rusty gold. Frank wasn't sold at first. Fame didn't interest him, he wanted antiques, not autographs. But eventually Mike convinced him. Asterisk, then. In 2010, American Pickers premiered on the History Channel. And everything changed. Asterisk, the show exploded. Viewers loved the simplicity to guys driving across the country, knocking on strangers' doors, crawling through barns, uncovering treasures with stories. But what really hooked people? Their chemistry. Asterisk, Mike was the deal maker, the talker, the engine, but Frank was the soul. He had a disarming charm that made even the gruffest hoarders open up. He didn't just buy antiques, he listened to them. Fans loved him for that. He was real. Asterisk, they called him the motorcycle guy. If there was a rusted bike under a pile of junk, Frank's eyes would light up like a kid on Christmas. And together, Frank and Mike built more than just a hit show. Asterisk, they built a cultural moment. For over a decade, they were inseparable, or so it seemed, but behind the scenes, something was cracking. In 2020, fans noticed something strange. Frank was missing from episodes. The official word: medical leave. He'd undergone serious back surgery, 185 stitches to rods in his spine. But as weeks turned into months, the silence got louder. And then the announcement: Frank was out, gone, replaced. Mike released a sterile public statement wishing Frank well, thanking him for his time. But to fans, something felt off, too clean, too easy. Then Frank spoke, and what he said changed everything. He didn't just feel let down, he felt betrayed. According to Frank, during his entire recovery months of pain, surgery, isolation, Mike never once called. Not a text, not a check-in. After more than a decade of working together, after sharing hotel rooms, diner breakfasts, and dusty miles on back roads, the silence hurt more than the surgery. Frank said the friendship fans believed in wasn't real, that the closeness was for the cameras. That Mike had been trying to push him out for years. It was a brutal revelation. And fans were furious. Some took Mike's side, pointing to Frank's health, his battles with addiction. Others stood by Frank, accusing the show of turning its back on the very heart of American pickers. But the damage was done. The duo was split. The show continued, but something was gone. The magic, the balance, the warmth, it had vanished. And Frankie, he disappeared from the screen, from public life, from picking, but his battles weren't over. Not even close. While fans mourned the absence of their favorite picker, Frank was quietly fighting wars most of them would never see. Not wars with cameras or contracts, but with his own body, mind, and past. For years, sharp-eyed viewers noticed changes. His weight dropped, his energy faded. Some assumed it was aging, others feared worse. And then the truth surfaced: Frank had Crohn's disease, a brutal, unpredictable illness with no cure. Imagine living each day unsure if your own body will betray you. One morning you're fine, the next you're doubled over in pain. Eating becomes a gamble, sleep becomes rare. That was Frank's reality. Yet through it all, he kept filming, kept smiling, kept joking. He lost 65 pounds trying to manage the disease, but it was never enough. Crohn's wasn't just a medical condition, it was a silent storm inside him, stealing strength one day at a time. But Crohn's wasn't the only storm. Fame had come quickly. Overnight, the quiet collector became a television icon. Suddenly, strangers recognized him at gas stations. Fans expected the cheerful, joke-cracking Frank they saw on screen, but real life was heavier. The pressure to perform, to entertain, to be on, it wore him down. And like many under that pressure, Frank sought relief. He found it in Xanax and alcohol. The combination was dangerous. In 2017, it all came crashing down. He was pulled over, driving the wrong way on an Iowa interstate. A DUI. Headlines. Exploded, not Frank the picker, not Frank the fan favorite, but Frank the offender. Behind the scenes, it was a moment of reckoning. He admitted the truth. Alcohol had become more than a vice. It was an escape, one he'd seen destroy his family. His mother had struggled with it. So had his grandfather, both had died from it. Frank was next in line unless he changed. So he did. He checked himself into rehab. Not for a weekend, not for a photo op, but for 77 days, a full, committed stay. And when he walked out, he told the world something that surprised even his harshest critics. I don't even like drinking anymore. He wanted to live, to heal, to get back to doing what he loved without the poison. But fate wasn't done testing him. In July 2022, Frank was found unresponsive in his Iowa home. A massive stroke. It hit hard, it hit fast, and it changed everything. He was rushed to the hospital, then to rehab. He couldn't walk, couldn't live alone. A court appointed a guardian to oversee his daily life. His finances were taken over by the bank. The man who once combed barns for vintage motorcycles, who bargained with a sparkle in his eye, who drove cross-country in search of stories, now needed help to stand, and the cost. Nearly $30,000 a month in medical care. Frank had hit the lowest point of his life. But something unexpected happened then, something few fans ever saw coming. Mike Wolfe came back. The man Frank had accused of betrayal. The partner he hadn't spoken to in years, the co-star who disappeared during his darkest days, showed up. In the hospital, Mike didn't bring cameras. No crews, no media, just himself. He sat by Frank's side. Talked to him, checked in on him, visited often. The silence that once divided them began to lift, slowly, awkwardly, then naturally. They laughed, reminisced, let old wounds breathe, no more egos. No more TV, just two old friends, scarred by life, finding their way back to something real. Mike would later say that in Frank's final months they spoke often, repaired the broken pieces, and by the time the end came, the resentment was gone. But there was one person who never returned, one person whose absence haunted Frank until his last breath. Her name was Diane Bankson. Their relationship was a saga, a love story full of promise and ultimately betrayal. They first met when Frank was just 25. Their bond stretched across decades. But it wasn't until 2017 that things got serious. Frank proposed, bought a home, gave her a diamond ring. He was ready to settle down, but just a year later, it shattered. Diane accused Frank of cheating, catching him in bed with another woman inside their farmhouse. Frank denied it, claimed it was her who'd been unfaithful, seeing another man in secret. The accusations flew. The engagement collapsed. Frank was devastated. And he made sure the pain stuck with a tattoo on his arm. Once a cheater, always a cheater. But the wounds weren't just emotional. In 2020, Diane filed a lawsuit accusing Frank of reckless behavior with fireworks that allegedly exploded and severely burned her. She suffered third-degree burns, said Frank refused to take her to the hospital. The case was later dismissed, but the damage permanent. Afterward, Frank sold the house they once shared. Diane moved on, announcing in 2022 she had found love again with someone new. They never spoke again. Not even during Frank's final days, and that's the tragedy no one wanted to talk about. Because for all the fans, the fame, and the fire trucks, Frank never healed from that heartbreak. As the months dragged on, Frank's condition continued to worsen. The world outside moved on, but his world had shrunk to a hospital bed, a rehabilitation center, and the fading memories of a life once filled with laughter, love, and long road trips. By September 2024, there was no more pretending, no miracle comeback, no hidden strength left to tap into. The doctors knew it, the staff knew it, and Frank, he knew it too. His stroke had left irreversible damage. His body already ravaged by Crohn's, addiction, heartbreak was tired. Every breath, every movement became a monumental effort. And in that final stretch, when the end was no longer a possibility but a certainty, Mike Wolfe didn't hesitate. He dropped everything. No camera crew, no press release, just a man showing up for a friend he hadn't always been kind to. And what happened next, few people know. Until now. Frank wasn't alone in those last hours. His mother was there, holding his hand. A longtime family friend sat nearby, silent, broken, and Mike sat close, never looking away. The room was quiet. Not a TV studio, no flashing lights, just soft breaths and a ticking clock. Mike leaned in, whispered something only Frank could hear. "I love you," he said. I forgive you, and it's okay now. Asterisk, they say some people need permission to let go. Maybe that was Frank's. Maybe that was the peace he needed. Asterisk, Frank Fritz died not as a celebrity, not as a co-host, but as a man surrounded by the last few people who still remembered who he truly was. Asterisk, his official cause of death was listed as late sequelae of cerebral infarction. In simpler terms, complications from the stroke he suffered in 2022, but that's not the full story. Asterisk, his heart was already weak, battered by aortic stenosis, a narrowing of the valve that feeds blood to the rest of the body. Day by day, it had grown harder for him to breathe, to move, to fight. Asterisk, the truth is, Frank didn't die from a single event, he died from the weight of everything. The long, quiet suffering, the betrayals, the loneliness. The battles he fought in silence until his body simply said, "No more." Asterisk, when news of his passing hit the press, fans mourned. Thousands posted memories, photos, heartfelt messages, but the loudest thing of all was the regret, the feeling that maybe, just maybe, we didn't appreciate him enough while he was here. Asterisk, and then came the interview. Asterisk, Mike Wolfe, who had stayed largely silent through most of the drama, finally spoke. Not as a businessman, not as a host, but as a man still carrying the ache of guilt. Asterisk, he said Frank had been a good man, a flawed one, yes, but one with a heart too big for the world he was thrown into. Asterisk, and then he said something no one expected. He only truly messed up once, Mike admitted. And it wasn't the show. It wasn't the addiction. It wasn't even the drinking. It was Diane. Asterisk, he paused. Asterisk, the moment Frank sold that house, the one he built with her. He didn't just sell real estate. He killed something. He gave up the one person who may have stood by him when it all fell apart. Asterisk, Mike clarified he didn't mean it literally. Diane didn't die, but what died was hope. Hope that Frank could rebuild. Hope that he wouldn't have to face the darkest years of his life alone. Asterisk, according to Mike, Diane wanted another chance. She had hope, but Frank, he walked away, and that, Mike said, was the real tragedy. Asterisk, not the fame, not the fights, but the silence, the phone that didn't ring, the words never said, the hand never held. Asterisk, because maybe, just maybe, if Diane had been by his side through the illness, through the rehab, through the stroke, maybe Frank would have had something to live for. Maybe he'd still be here. Asterisk, it's easy to talk about Frank as the picker, the collector, the funny guy on TV. But when you peel that all away, you're left with a man who wanted what we all want: connection, love, a reason to keep going. Asterisk, and in the end, those treasures are harder to find than anything he ever picked from a junkyard. Asterisk, Frank spent his life chasing forgotten objects, but it's the people he met, the laughter he shared, the memories he left behind that became his true collection. Asterisk, maybe that's what we take from this. That beyond the antiques and backroads and broken barns, Frank Fritz gave us a story, a deeply human one. Not perfect, but real. Asterisk, and now it's your turn to reflect. Do you believe in second chances? In forgiveness? Asterisk, can broken friendships be repaired? Can lost love be salvaged before it's too late? Asterisk, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, because there are stories, real stories, still waiting to be uncovered.